Tomorrow's planned re-entry into the Pike River mine has been delayed due to concerns about unexpected and unexplained atmospheric readings. The long-awaited re-entry was to have been marked by a ceremony attended by the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and families of the miners killed in the 2010 explosion on the west coast. The minister responsible for the Pike River re-entry, Andrew Little, announced this afternoon that monitoring systems reported an elevated level of oxygen at the far end of the drift. Mr. Little joins me now. Minister, how disappointing is this?
It's obviously disappointing. There's been a lot of planning and preparation to get to this point. We've had experts locally and from around the world involved in the project. No one had predicted that this would happen as we started the process of drilling the 30-metre seal, getting ready to have that pulled out. And because no one could explain, or that what happened was unusual and couldn't be explained, the pre-planned response to that is to stop work and evaluate what's going on and to know with certainty what is causing this elevated reading.
When did you find out exactly that there was a problem?
I found out last night about the elevated reading, and the planned action then was to look at the monitoring equipment and actually put in new monitoring equipment overnight. And one of the things you have to rule out is that it's not a false reading. And then the preliminary additional reading this morning that I was advised of at about 11:15 was that there is still an elevated oxygen level reading. Can't explain it, and therefore we initiated the response action plan.
So when did you tell the families?
I spoke to Anna Osborne of the Family Reference Group at about 11:45, 12 o'clock.
And what did she say to you in that conversation?
Obviously expressed disappointment, and but the thing is that she and others have been involved in so much of the decision making of the agency in the last 16 months. She knows the technical challenges that we're dealing with, and she was very realistic about it. And she said, "Look, we've had setbacks already, but we need to do this safely." Everybody agreed right from the outset that the main operating principle of the agency and this whole project is safety first.
So how much discussion was had around whether the re-entry should go ahead or not? My understanding is that the reading is on the low end of the scale of oxygen, around 3%, is that right?
It's between sort of 1.5% and 3%. But I think the point is that there was a change in the atmospheric conditions that wasn't expected and couldn't be explained. And given that the nature of this project requires a pretty complex process for ventilating the drift and also making sure that any methane or any risk of methane is neutralised, we need to know if there is a source of additional gas coming into the drift, in this case oxygen. We need to know what that source is so we can manage it. And until we know that and can explain what's happening, we've got to take the ultimate precaution and stop operations until we can explain it to ourselves.
But did any of the team still think it was an option to go in?
No, it was the advice was pretty clear. The agreed action plan was pretty clear. In fact, we've been under intense scrutiny by WorkSafe for some time now, as you would expect. Their whole thing was they said, we want to know if various things happen, what is your pre-planned response to that? We have a pre-planned response for an incident like this. It is to stop operations. We followed that plan. We've stopped operations.
Who ultimately called it?
The agency staff. It was Dingy Pattinson, the Chief Operating Officer, who's also the Statutory Mine Manager, and Dave Gawn, the Chief Executive of the agency. Okay,
so the test that you had some problems with, that was yesterday. When was the last test before that one?
Well, the monitoring is happening all the time. So they're taking readings every hour virtually.
So basically, sorry to interrupt you, Minister, this was a complete turnaround then, a very swift change to the circumstances in the mine.
Yes, and it followed the commencement of the drilling operations to prepare the removal of the 30-metre seal, and that's why it clearly appeared to be related to the change in atmospheric conditions or the change in air pressure caused by breaking through the 30-metre seal. That was why it needed to be understood and explained, and when we couldn't do that, we had to stop operations.
Because that kind of raises some really serious questions. If it coincides with the limited drilling that you've already done, is it possible that you actually might not be able to make a safe entry at all?
No, I certainly wouldn't go that far, and that's not the advice that I've received.
But you can't rule that out, can you? You can't rule that possibility totally out.
Well, I think what we do know with underground mines, any underground activity, but particularly with a coal mine, it doesn't take much in terms of activity or change in the physical environment for the atmospheric conditions to be changed as well. What you need to know is what's going on. This whole operation is based on both neutralising the methane that's in the mine workings behind the rockfall, and also being able to ventilate the main tunnel, the drift, so that when workers go in for the recovery operation, they can do so without breathing apparatus. That is to say, it's breathable atmosphere. When something happens that changes the mix in the atmosphere, you've got to know what's happening and why it's happening so you can manage that ventilation part of the project. And that's why we need to be sure about what's going on.
Okay, so at the moment, you don't actually know what the problem is. So who is going to tell you what it is and how to fix it?
Well, you go through, there's a troubleshooting and problem-solving exercise underway right now. So it's a combination of testing various parts, but one of the things is testing the accuracy of the measuring equipment. And the
is there some suggestion that that is actually the problem, that the equipment is faulty?
Some of the measuring equipment, the monitoring equipment that we're using is monitoring equipment that has been in the drift since the original explosions over 8 years ago. So there's a question about whether any of that equipment has degraded, and we can do that by bringing in new monitoring equipment, new sensors that are doing the monitoring and gauging, or comparing those particular readings.
How soon can you get those new sensors in? Sorry, Minister, how soon can the new sensors go in?
They've been putting in new sensors today, and you then need to build up a track record of measures and that monitoring to see whether there is a discrepancy between the two different monitors.
Okay, so how many clean results, if you like, once you install the new sensors, how many clean results do you need before you say, okay, we're good to go?
You want to go for a period of days.
Do you know how many days, around about?
No, and I don't want to be specific about it, but my advice is that you would want to have a period of days of consistent readings from both the old and the new monitoring equipment to gauge what is actually happening. All along the way, we're also staying in touch with our various experts, both locally and internationally.
But if you cannot get this right, the readings, do you accept that and you're prepared to walk away?
We've always said safety comes first. We're not going to put lives at risk. And that's the approach that we're taking. All the indications are at the moment that this is a problem that, with some good problem solving, good thinking about it, knowing that this is really about making sure that we ventilate the drift properly and safely, is that we can get through this.
Appreciate you joining us this evening. That is Andrew Little, the Minister there in charge of the re-entry to Pike River.